My name, Evelyn Vance, 23 years old. The air in the cavernous University of Chicago graduation hall was thick with pride, and the muted roar of hundreds of ecstatic families echoed off the high ceiling, signaling my moment to cross the stage and accept the Bachelor of Science in Finance that I had bled for. And as I walked toward the dean, a single figure in the front row stood up. It wasn't an ovation. It was my father, Robert Vance. He strode with chilling determination not towards me, but straight onto the stage past the bewildered faculty members. The noise in the hall instantly died, replaced by a collective, horrified gasp. Robert reached me just as I took the diploma cover. His face was a mask of cold fury devoid of any paternal warmth I had ever desperately sought. He didn't hesitate. A sharp, stinging slap landed squarely across my cheek, the sound cracking like a whip through the silent auditorium. My hand instinctively flew to my face, the diploma cover slipping from my grasp. Then came the words spat out like poison. "You don't deserve that degree," he hissed, his voice amplified by the dead silence. My mother, Diane Vance, rushed up to join him, her face contorted. "You're just a failure and a disgrace to this family. Evelyn," she screamed, her shrill tone reaching every corner. I stood there stunned but dry-eyed, my fingers numb. Just below the stage, my older sister Shelby leaned back against her seat, a smug, contemptuous smirk plastered across her face, arms crossed tightly over her chest. They thought this public humiliation was their final act of control, their ultimate triumph in proving my worthlessness to the world. But standing there feeling the fresh sting of my father's hand and the ancient sting of their hatred, I didn't crumble. Instead, a cold, liberating clarity washed over me. They had no idea what I would do next. They thought they had broken me before the world yet. In that single shocking moment, I simply decided to cut them all out of my life permanently. Before we dive into the full story of why I made that choice and what happened next, I have to ask. Before we go any further into my story, tell me what time you're watching this and which city you're watching from, so I know just how far my story has traveled. I have to go back 15 years to when I was just a 10-year-old girl to truly explain why that moment on the stage didn't break me. It was because the foundations of my spirit had already been chiseled away, piece by painful piece, by the very people who were supposed to love me. The Vance household, located in a quiet, affluent suburb of Dallas, Texas, was a realm ruled by one unwavering law, Shelby's Law. Shelby was the golden child, the crown jewel. She was praised lavishly for every minuscule achievement and excused entirely for every catastrophic failure. Meanwhile, I was the shadow, the scapegoat, the designated problem child. I recall one glaring instance when I was 12. Robert had always cherished his antique Ford pickup. It was more than just a truck, it was his pride. Shelby, attempting to learn to drive despite being too young, backed it straight into the garage wall, crunching the fender. The air turned heavy with dread. Instead of anger, my mother Diane rushed to hug Shelby, cooing, "Oh, honey, you must be so tired." "It's okay. Accidents happen when you're fast and active." They treated the damage as a quirky mishap. 2 weeks later, I accidentally knocked over a cheap ceramic vase, a gaudy piece Diane bought at a garage sale. Robert dragged me into the living room, screaming that I was clumsy and careless, an agent of chaos. I was forced to kneel on rice grains for 3 hours as punishment, while Shelby watched television, occasionally throwing a pitying glance my way. It was this constant, extreme disparity that defined my childhood. They didn't just prefer Shelby, they actively despised me. Diane weaponized words against me, constantly comparing me to Shelby with a cutting verbal precision. "Look at you, Evelyn. Always so slow, always so quiet. Why can't you be more outgoing like Shelby? From small to big, you only know how to make trouble," was a phrase I heard almost daily. My meager achievements, like winning a school spelling bee, were dismissed as dumb luck or something any ordinary child could do. Shelby conversely never missed an opportunity to compound my misery. She was inherently lazy but deeply manipulative. If I left a dirty dish out, she would deliberately move it under my bed, and then call Robert to inspect my room, ensuring I got the ensuing public humiliation in front of relatives. This vicious cycle of sabotage and public shaming became the backdrop of every family gathering. The physical labor of the house also fell to me. While Shelby spent her afternoons at the mall or talking on the phone, I was the one scrubbing floors, tending to the lawn, and preparing dinner. My parents watched indifferent, believing this work ethic might somehow fix my fundamental flaws. The emotional neglect was perhaps the most brutal blow. On my 16th birthday, a milestone in the US Robert and Diane entirely forgot. They were preoccupied helping Shelby prepare for a weekend party with her friends. I sat alone in my room listening to their cheerful planning downstairs, feeling a cold, profound realization I was truly invisible to them. That night, after being scolded again for a minor infraction that Shelby had provoked, I heard Robert tell Diane, "That girl Evelyn, she's just an unnecessary hassle. Shelby is the only one who will ever make us proud." Hearing those words not meant for my ears solidified the truth I already knew. The Vance home wasn't a family. It was a prison where I was the inmate, and Shelby was the warden. The cold silence at the dinner table, punctuated only by Shelby's chirping, and my parents' doting laughter, served as a constant reminder that I was unwanted. The toxic atmosphere was so pervasive that the mere sound of their car pulling into the driveway would make my heart pound, knowing another moment of disdain was imminent. I understood then that if I wanted to survive, I had to stop looking for their love and start looking for an exit. Turning 18 was not a celebration. It was the activation of my escape plan, the final key turning in the lock of that Texas suburban prison. The thought of staying one more minute in that house, enduring another dinner where my accomplishments were ignored or my presence was merely tolerated, was unbearable. I secured my acceptance to the University of Chicago not for the prestige, but for the geographical distance it offered. My parents, surprisingly, were indifferent, too busy making plans for Shelby to attend the local community college, which they loudly proclaimed was a smarter, more cost-effective choice for someone with her natural leadership talents. I made a definitive decision: I would not accept a single penny from the Vance family. This wasn't merely pride, it was strategy. Financial dependence meant continued emotional blackmail and control. I relied entirely on the savings from my part-time job as a barista during high school, coupled with a fiercely earned merit scholarship. That first year in Chicago was brutal. To pay for the rest of my tuition and living expenses, I juggled 3 jobs. I worked early mornings at a Starbucks, spent afternoons shelving books at the university library, and took on late-night shifts as a proofreader for a small online publication. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. My diet consisted mostly of ramen and cheap coffee, but every blister and every exhausted hour was a mile marker away from the Vance household. My parents, occasionally calling to brag about Shelby's superficial sorority life, would sneer at my struggle. "What's the point of working like a common laborer, Evelyn? You're supposed to be studying." Only Shelby has the sense to focus on the things that matter, not these useless, sweaty jobs, Robert once told me during a brief, perfunctory call. But that same hardship led me to 2 crucial relationships that started the slow process of healing. The first was with my Aunt Carol, my father's younger sister, who had cut ties with Robert and Diane years ago due to their toxic behavior. Carol, a litigation paralegal, reached out after hearing I was in Chicago. She saw my struggle and offered not money, but invaluable guidance, helping me navigate the complex world of academic grants and corporate sponsorships. She recognized my quiet intelligence and relentless determination, qualities my parents had always refused to acknowledge. "Evelyn, you have the kind of inner steel that will make you untouchable. Don't waste it trying to earn their love. Earn your own life." Carol advised, her voice a soothing balm. It was Aunt Carol who secured my first real professional recognition, a highly competitive research assistant position, working on a burgeoning field in fintech. This was the first time an adult outside of my paid employers had truly seen and validated my intellectual capability. The second and more profound connection was with Marcus Jones, a fellow student I met while working at the university library. Marcus saw the exhaustion behind my eyes but also the burning ambition. He became my steadfast anchor, a man who offered unconditional support without any expectation of return. I remember the day I confessed the truth about my family, the slaps, the neglect, the constant comparison to Shelby. He didn't offer pity. He offered belief. They were blind, Ev. They were threatened by you because you never needed them. That fire you have, it's going to light up the world, not burn it down, he reassured me, his hand gentle on my shoulder. For the first time, I felt truly safe and cherished. With Carol's guidance and Marcus's unwavering emotional support, I didn't just survive college. I thrived channeling years of repressed anger and self-doubt into academic excellence, all the while knowing I was building a fortress. They could never penetrate a life they could never control. 3 years later, while the Vance family assumed I was still struggling to piece together minimum wage jobs, my world had undergone a transformation I kept fiercely private. My research assistant position had evolved into a pivotal role within a promising fintech startup which was quickly gaining traction. Just shy of my 22nd birthday, I leveraged my research and relentless late nights to develop a crucial algorithm that streamlined the company's core operations. This success culminated in a massive contract signing, and my initial bonus and stock options were valued at an astounding $75,000, real money earned entirely by me. This financial stability was the ultimate rebellion, the ability to choose my own life free from their economic shadow. I kept this success hidden from the Vances, viewing it as my private shield. However, shields eventually need to be deployed. A few months later, the Vance family's world began to crumble. Their chain of hardware supply stores, largely managed, or rather mismanaged by the natural leadership talent of Shelby, hit a catastrophic wall. Shelby, prioritizing parties and superficial social climbing over inventory control and accounting, had made a series of reckless decisions and embezzlement schemes that led to massive losses and serious tax issues. The family business, which represented the bulk of Robert and Diane's retirement and their perceived standing in the community, was suddenly hemorrhaging money, sinking fast into overwhelming debt. I received the first frantic call from Diane, not the usual demanding tone, but one soaked in artificial tears and false vulnerability. She didn't apologize for the past or even ask how I was. She simply plunged into the drama. "Evelyn, we're ruined. The bank is threatening foreclosure on the house. The business is sinking. Your father, he might go to jail. Our whole life is falling apart, and the lawyer said we need a huge sum immediately. The family only has you left to turn to now, honey." The shift in their language was jarringly abrupt. I was no longer the disgrace. I was suddenly the family's last hope. Shelby followed up with a text uncharacteristically polite and full of grammatical errors, essentially begging me to save her from facing the music. My initial reaction was a satisfying, cold indifference. This was the natural, long overdue consequence of their decades of toxic indulgence towards Shelby. Marcus, witnessing my reaction, cautioned me against any involvement. "Ev, this is not your cross to bear. Let them face the consequences of their actions." Aunt Carol echoed his sentiment, warning me about the legal risks. But a primal, deep-seated fear rooted in my traumatic childhood surfaced: the fear of social scandal, the fear of Robert going to prison and tarnishing my own last name, the fear of the chaos spilling over and somehow dragging me back in. I reluctantly agreed to step in, not out of love, but out of a calculated strategic self-preservation. I offered a deal. I would inject a substantial sum, an initial $250,000, to stabilize the business and pay off their most critical debts. Crucially, Aunt Carol drew up a meticulous legal agreement. All assets I saved, including the family home and the remaining store locations, had to be immediately placed under a complex legal trust with me as the sole named beneficiary and legal custodian. This move gave me complete financial control, ensuring they couldn't simply waste the money again. Their reaction after the money transfer was complete was nauseating. Robert, Diane, and even Shelby started acting like I was the prodigal daughter returned. Robert called me a visionary. Diane cooed about how proud she was of my business sense, and Shelby awkwardly attempted to initiate friendly conversations. It was a 180-degree turnaround of praise, a flimsy facade of respect built entirely on my bank balance. They mistook my strategic assistance for genuine reconciliation, and I played along silently knowing this was just the cost of my complete freedom later. That flimsy facade of respect lasted exactly 6 months, a period during which I meticulously managed their finances, paid their bills, and began to restructure the failing business with the help of Aunt Carol, all while they continued to treat me like a glorified, slightly unwelcome ATM. My primary objective was maintaining the strict legal control I had established in the trust agreement. They had signed everything away under duress, and now I held the keys to their entire financial existence, including the deed to their house and the business titles, all standing securely in my name. I was preparing to graduate an event that should have marked the culmination of my independent success when the true sickening nature of their character was violently exposed. The discovery was completely accidental yet perfectly timed. I had lent my old laptop to Shelby when hers broke, forgetting I had a cloud-synced transcription app running on the background tied to my work phone. A few days before my graduation, while checking my email on the laptop, a file popped up, an audio transcription of a video call between Robert, Diane, and Shelby from the night before. I pressed play, my heart sinking even before the words registered. Their voices were muffled, but the content was chillingly clear. They were discussing me, their savior, with utter contempt. "That girl Evelyn is such a fool," Diane's voice hissed. "She thinks she's so smart saving us. As if she could ever manage a proper business. She's too timid." Robert responded, his voice cold and calculating. "It was a smart play, signing those papers. She bailed us out, and now we just need the final act. We're changing the final legal designation right after her graduation. We tell her we're giving her a reward. Get her to sign one last thing, and the money she put in, all $250,000, will be listed as a simple, non-recoverable gift to Shelby." Shelby chimed in, a triumphant venom dripping from her tone. "And all the assets she saved will legally pass back to us. We'll finally get rid of her for good. She's just a dumb little research assistant playing entrepreneur." The audio played on, detailing their plan to publicly humiliate me at graduation, not just to shame me, but as a deliberate distraction. They wanted me preoccupied and emotionally drained, so I wouldn't pay attention to the final legal documents they planned to slip in front of me the following day. My blood ran cold, not from hurt, but from a calculated fury. They weren't just ungrateful. They were actively plotting to steal my money and use my own legal safeguards against me. They had used the concept of family one last time as a twisted, manipulative lever. This revelation transformed the upcoming graduation from a personal milestone into a battlefield. My attendance was no longer about receiving a degree. It was about confronting their ultimate betrayal. I immediately called Aunt Carol and Marcus. Over the next 48 hours, we worked feverishly. Carol, using her legal expertise, helped me draw up the final devastating document, a comprehensive notice of revocation for every single legal instrument I had signed on their behalf: the loan guarantees, the deeds of trust, the business registrations. I ensured that the very moment I signed the final document, which I planned to do on the day of graduation, every single asset and debt would revert immediately back to their original pre-bailout bankrupt status. As I stood in the reception area on graduation day, watching Robert and Diane's forced smiles, I knew they were savoring the anticipation of their betrayal. They wouldn't stop talking about how they were going to officially honor Shelby soon. But I wasn't just ready for their plot. I was steps ahead, waiting for the precise moment to detonate the carefully constructed trap they had built for themselves. I walked up to that stage not as their daughter but as a judge, delivering a carefully prepared sentence carrying the weight of 2 decades of systemic abuse and the knowledge of their current immediate betrayal. The moment Robert charged up, his eyes blazing with the self-righteous anger of a man who believes he is always correct, was the moment I had mentally rehearsed. The shock of his palm connecting with my face was secondary to the cold focus of my resolve. When he spat, "You don't deserve that degree," and Diane screamed, "You're just a failure and a disgrace," I saw not my parents, but 2 utterly pathetic, grasping criminals trying to execute a plan I had already thwarted. I refused to let my tears fall. They didn't deserve that emotional satisfaction. I slowly raised my hand from my stinging cheek, looking Robert directly in his eyes, my voice steady, dangerously low, and amplified by the silence of the crowd. "If I don't deserve this degree, then I certainly don't deserve the financial burden of saving a family that clearly wants me ruined." I didn't wait for their reaction. I pulled a small, official-looking document from the inside of my gown pocket, the notice of revocation I had signed just an hour before. I held it up for the television cameras and the assembled audience to see. "Robert and Diane Vance." I announced loud enough for the microphone to catch every syllable. "You just committed assault on a stage meant to honor achievement. I am here to inform you and everyone present that the legal control I exercised over your debt, your business, and your residence is hereby terminated. Since you claim I am worthless, I am simply withdrawing all my assets and all my legal support." The gasps returned louder this time, not for the slap, but for the sudden catastrophic shift of power. Robert's face instantly drained of color, his fury replaced by sheer terrified comprehension. Diane stopped screaming about disgrace and started whimpering. I continued listing the facts clearly. "Effective immediately, the $250,000 I used to pay your creditors is designated as an outstanding loan I am actively recalling. The collateral, your home and your store properties, which are legally registered under my name in trust, are now subject to immediate lien enforcement." I didn't stop there. I needed them to understand the absolute finality of this moment. I will not be the one signing over my assets to Shelby as you planned. Instead, the bank is being notified now that my personal guarantee and collateral on your loans are withdrawn. The properties revert immediately to the legal status they held before my intervention, severely delinquent and facing immediate foreclosure. Robert lunged forward, not to hurt me but to grab the document, howling, "No, you can't do this. Evelyn, we're your parents." I calmly sidestepped him. From the crowd, Aunt Carol and Marcus stood up. Carol held up a folder addressing the security officer who was approaching the stage. "She is executing a legal pre-signed revocation of a financial guarantee. I am her legal representative. The situation is under control." Marcus walked onto the stage, not aggressively, but protectively, gently taking my arm. He looked at Robert and Diane with deep disgust. "You don't have a daughter anymore. You only have a debt." I let Marcus lead me off the stage, leaving Robert and Diane in a complete state of frantic collapse, screaming and turning on each other, their carefully constructed public image dissolving into the chaos of a financial implosion right in the middle of a major university ceremony. I didn't look back. The satisfaction was chilling, clean, and absolute. A single week after the disastrous graduation ceremony, the chaos of the public spectacle had subsided, replaced by the grim, undeniable reality of financial consequence. My actions were swift and surgically precise. Because the family had been so close to bankruptcy before my intervention, the moment my personal guarantees and collateral were revoked, the banks did not hesitate. The properties, the family home, and the remaining two store locations were immediately marked for foreclosure, a direct and devastating result of my strategic withdrawal. Robert and Diane had foolishly believed my money was their safety net. Now it was the detonator of their own ruin. The final confrontation was not dramatic, but cold and professional. I met them and Shelby at Aunt Carol's law firm not to negotiate, but to solidify the end of our relationship. They came in frantic, demanding, utterly unwilling to accept responsibility. Robert started by trying to appeal to my sense of duty. "Evelyn, this is your family. You can't just stand by and watch us lose everything. We need you to sign the papers to put the house back in our name." He pleaded, his face swollen and desperate. Diane tried manipulation, clutching my arm with a sudden feigned maternal affection. "I was so stressed at graduation, honey. We didn't mean those things. Shelby needs this house. She has no job, and we're all you have." I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. "You lost your right to be my family the moment my father raised his hand. And you cheered him on, Diane. I am not here to reconcile. I am here to confirm the legal separation." Aunt Carol laid out the facts on the table, detailing the foreclosure notices and the massive outstanding debt. She explained that their credit ratings were now destroyed, making it virtually impossible for them to secure any new loans in the near future, a very real and practical consequence in the U.S. financial system. The tension in the room snapped when Robert and Diane turned on the true culprit. "This is your fault," Shelby. Robert bellowed, his face turning purple as he pointed a trembling finger at his favorite child. "Your incompetence and selfishness are why we are losing our retirement. Evelyn tried to save us and you dragged us all down." The irony was heavy and bitter. The golden child, their lifelong source of pride, was now the recipient of their most vicious blame. Shelby, realizing her parents were no longer shielding her, screamed back, accusing them of being foolish and too trusting of me. She snatched her purse and stormed out, abandoning them to their fate. I watched the spectacle of their final public implosion with a detached calmness. When the door finally closed behind Shelby, leaving Robert and Diane weeping and arguing about who had signed the most incriminating document, I stood up. "This is the last time you will ever see me," I stated, my voice unwavering. "I am done. The debts are yours. The house is gone. The business is gone. There is no going back." I walked out of that law firm with Marcus, leaving Robert and Diane to face the ruin they had so meticulously engineered. Later that evening, I methodically blocked their numbers, their emails, and every social media profile. The Vance family was officially irrevocably erased from my life. 6 months later, the oppressive weight of the Vance family was a distant bad memory. Marcus and I had moved to Seattle, a city of fresh air and new beginnings, where I accepted a prestigious position at a rapidly growing financial firm. The professional challenge was exhilarating and the environment was supportive, a stark contrast to the toxicity I had escaped. My life was finally my own, defined by my success and my choices, not by their condemnation. The scar on my face from Robert's slap had faded, but the lesson remained sharp and clear. With Marcus, I experienced for the first time what true unconditional support felt like. He was my partner, not just a bystander, and together we built a home founded on mutual respect and shared dreams. Our relationship was the ultimate evidence that healing was possible and that not all families are bound by blood. I kept tabs on the Vances only through Aunt Carol, who acted as a neutral party in handling the final stages of the legal fallout. Robert and Diane were living in a small rental apartment, struggling to find new work due to their massive debt and ruined credit profile. The golden child, Shelby, had completely cut off contact with them after they blamed her for the business collapse, having to resort to living with a series of boyfriends to survive. The cycle of selfishness had completed its turn, leaving all three of them isolated and miserable, a consequence I accepted as the necessary and realistic outcome of their prolonged cruelty in the American financial landscape. I finally understood that their attempt to break me on that stage was not about my failure. It was about their fear of my potential and the uncontrollable threat I posed to their fragile, false reality. My degree and my success were proof that everything they had said about me for 20 years was a lie, and that lie had been their core identity. Looking back, the emotional labor of holding on to that family for so long was far more damaging than the actual final separation. The act of cutting them off was not vengeful, it was self-preservation. It was the moment I claimed my own value, a value they had always denied. The biggest lesson I learned is this: family is not defined by blood but by respect, love, and safety. Never be afraid to set ironclad boundaries, even cutting off contact entirely to protect your peace and your self-worth from those who consistently seek to destroy it. I want to thank you all for staying with me through this entire journey, for bearing witness to the hardest day of my life, and for seeing the strength that came after. If you've ever had to fight to escape a story that someone else wrote for you, or if this story resonated with your own struggles with boundaries and toxic relationships, please share your thoughts and your own personal perspective in the comments below. Let me know what you think of the choices I made and the value I found in walking away. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future stories about freedom, self-worth, and fighting for the life you deserve.